The Israeli government's control over the judiciary has increased. Recently, the Israeli parliament passed legislations that give Israeli politicians more control over the selection of judges in the country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has long sought a judicial overhaul, aiming for greater government control over judicial appointments. Protests have also taken place in Israel regarding this issue, as many people see it as an attack on judicial independence. According to them, increasing government control over the judiciary undermines democratic checks and balances. Meanwhile, the Israeli government argues that these changes are being made to make the judicial appointment process more representative and balanced. Governments across the globe often justify increasing political control over judicial appointments by claiming it will enhance efficiency, prevent judicial overreach, and make the selection process more democratic and aligned with the public mandate. Whereas the judiciary strives to maintain its independence and minimize executive interference. As a result, tensions are evident between the judiciary and the executive in the country. This is why we often hear judges emphasizing judicial independence, while politicians advocating for judicial reforms. If we look at the example of India, there is a Collegium system for the appointment and transfer of judges. Under this system, the senior-most judges recommend appointments and transfers of other judges. Yes, the government can raise objections or ask for clarification regarding why a judge was appointed or transferred. However, if the Collegium does not change its recommendation and reaffirms it, the government must comply. For this reason, questions are often raised about the Collegium system in India, that the selection and transfer process of judges is not transparent. Judges themselves select other judges, and no public information is provided regarding why a particular candidate was chosen or rejected. No explanations are given in this regard. Consequently, allegations of nepotism and favoritism arise in the judiciary, as it is believed that certain candidates receive undue benefits. To address this issue, the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act, or the NJAC Act, was introduced in India in 2014. This act aimed to replace the Collegium system by involving the Union Law Minister and two eminent persons from civil society in judicial appointments, ensuring that judges alone would not have sole authority over the selection and transfer process. However, in 2015, the Supreme Court struck down the NJAC. The court held that the NJAC would increase political control, thereby compromising judicial independence. An independent judiciary is essential to democracy, as it acts as a check on executive power. Therefore, the judiciary must retain the authority to review government decisions. Now, the same logic can be seen in Israel as well. Supporters of judicial independence believe that these judicial reforms will disturb the balance of power between the judiciary and the government. Power will shift towards the government, and if this happens, the government's influence will increase, while its accountability will decrease, raising the risk of authoritarianism. This is one viewpoint. However, there is an opposing viewpoint. Those who support the judicial overhaul believe that the judiciary should be made more transparent. They argue that the will of the people should be reflected in the judiciary's role, and that it should not overstep its authority or override the decisions of a democratically elected government. Since the people have chosen their political leaders, these leaders serve as their representatives. Therefore, the final say in the country's laws and governance should rest with elected representatives rather than selected judges. Now, things get more complicated because Israel does not have a formal written constitution. Instead, the country operates under a set of basic laws. But who has the ultimate authority to interpret them? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Israel determines the meaning of the country's basic laws, which is why tensions exist between the judiciary and the government. The judiciary sees its intervention as necessary to protect democracy, while the government considers it judicial overreach. For this reason, the Netanyahu government has passed legislation to limit the court's influence. However, critics argue that this is not the only motive. There is more to it. Actually, Netanyahu has been accused of corruption, fraud, and bribery, allegations he firmly denies. Some believe he seeks to limit the judiciary's power to prevent it from declaring him unfit to serve as Prime Minister in the future. In other words, they argue that Netanyahu is increasing political control over the judiciary to shield himself from legal challenges. Additionally, Netanyahu would not want the judiciary to obstruct his broader agenda. For instance, he likely seeks to avoid judicial pushback on his actions in Gaza. If he pursues territorial expansion, He does not want the courts to intervene on the grounds of human rights or other legal concerns. This is why he aims to consolidate power by reducing what he calls the existing disproportionate influence of the judiciary. Due to these judicial reforms, polarization is increasing in Israel. People in the country are divided, and protests and debates are taking place. Opposing voices see this as a threat to democratic values, viewing it as an attempt by Netanyahu to shield himself from corruption trials and remain in power. On the other hand, supporters of the judicial reforms argue that this is not democratic backsliding, but merely a rebalancing of power. They believe that the judiciary has wielded excessive power over elected representatives, and these reforms are just an attempt to rectify that. Anyway, how do you view the steps taken to reshape the judiciary in Israel? In your opinion, are these judicial reforms a democratic necessity or an attempt by the government to consolidate power? Secondly, what are your thoughts on the Collegium system and NJAC in India? Feel free to share your opinion in the comment section. That is all for this session. Thank you for your time.